All right. Hello and welcome to another sales chat. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM. And today, as usual, I'm joined by my colleague Martha, who is in Vienna. Feeling a little under the weather, Martha. Sorry to hear.
No worries. Things happen.
Yeah. And our guest, Andy Paul, who is in New York. How you doing, Andy?
Yes, John, doing well. How about you?
Excellent. Yeah, doing great. So Andy, if you don't know about him, Andy Paul, you can find him. It's very easy to find online on LinkedIn. He helps sales teams and salespeople accelerate their sales, coaching programs, really help you. And his book is Amp Up Sales, right?
Amp Up Your Sales is one of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our big thing now is the Sales House, which is an all-in-one growth program for B2B sellers, and we're launched that late last year, and we're very excited about it.
Excellent. So who better to talk about sales trends that you need to know about in 2019? And for those of you watching or listening, you want to get involved, get on Twitter, and it's #SalesChats. Get involved in the conversation. Give us your input. Give us your ideas. Martha will track them, and if there's something really interesting comes up, she will interrupt us. Okay, so
Perfect.
Let's start with an easy question, Andy.
Sure.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges you think salespeople are going to face in 2019?
Yeah, I think they're the same challenges that maybe they're becoming accentuated a little bit, but it's how do they become more human? How do they master these fundamental human skills that really make the difference between losing and winning? You think about the environment in which we all operate in sales is we don't have control over much, right? We don't have control over the product, the pricing, the competitors, the customer, their buying process. The only thing we have control over are the way we conduct ourselves in front of the buyer. And so I think that there's been sort of a trend thinking that we can sort of automate some of these human skills and so on. And I think people are beginning to understand that, yeah, most of those we can't. And it's still very important to focus on those. And I think increasingly important as we see more automation coming into sales.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I think that we've had a lot of stuff come up, bots and AI and all of this kind of stuff, and people thinking that you can replace the human interaction. But personally, I think while they have a place and they can do some great things, I think people are the pendulum's starting to swing back, and I think people are looking for more of that human connection. And I think in the buying and selling process, we really want to engage with somebody who we think knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, I think really what we're seeing is so we sort of went, the pendulum sort of swung, as you said, coming back and saying, okay, now how do we use this great technology to make these human skills more effective, to make the human interactions have more impact? And I think that's the appropriate thing. I think one of the trends I was going to talk about is, how do we use this data we're collecting? Whether it's call recording data or the statistics about sales activities, how do we use that to accentuate these human skills? Because that's to me is the real appropriate use of that data.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, there was the other big thing over the last number of years was like big data. Wow, we can collect data, more data on everything. But the reality at the end of the day is it's really about small data, because it's about specific pieces of data and how you use that, rather than just collecting tons of data and then sitting there kind of swamped in data. Because at the end of the day, behind the data is a human, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly there's a lot that's being talked about these days and being written about in terms of the danger of algorithms, or putting too much faith in algorithms, because they all originate from a human at some point. But I think the thing with data is that we don't know how to use it, right? At least in sales, we've got a ton of data, but how can we use it most effectively? Because the way it's primarily used is it's used to confirm our current beliefs, right? So we have all this confirmation bias, and this is, we don't use it to challenge, but also the data we get is incomplete, and so we don't look at the context of the data that's being provided. We don't look at the missing variables that could impact, if we looked at it really deeply. And I've had people on my podcast to talk about this. We have a learning curve to go through with this to become adept at using all the data that's out there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's another part of it. So data is obviously it's an essential part, and it can tell you a lot of things. But to your point, is you need to question the data you're looking at. You need to make sure that it is really relevant to what you're trying to achieve, and be as I said, be a little more skeptical about data, right?
Well, yeah, I think you have to ask questions about it. To your point, you have to interrogate the data because, just an example, and this is not to criticize anyone in particular, but because we're sort of enthusiastic about the fact that we have access to this data, it's giving us insights, perhaps, or what we think are insights that we didn't have before. But you may see a report coming, somebody coming out and saying, "Look, we've analyzed 60,000 phone calls, and if you use these words in this order, this is going to make a huge difference." But the missing variables are, okay, well, what type of product are you selling?
Yeah.
What's the price point? What type of company are you selling to? Is it a large enterprise, a small company? I could list 24 variables that would have an impact on that data. And so it may be right in certain cases, but you can't say, yeah, it's true across the board, because again, you're missing those variables. So that's the thing. I think we'll become more adept and hopefully, again, have more tools and maybe greater processing power and so on to help us, come with more pinpoint solutions or pinpoint uses of the data. Yeah.
And what's it 60,000 calls to the same person? So
well, to know. that's in my cadence, 60,000 calls.
So, okay, so we're talking about salespeople, and let's switch it over to buyers, right? Because there's been a ton of talk, right, over the last 5, 10, 15 years, changing in buyer behaviors. And then we had the great argument about how much buyers had changed and how far into the sales process or the buying process they were, and all of that kind of stuff. Yada, yada, exactly. And everybody was arguing percentages. Right. But so today, where do you think buyers are today? And what do you think buyers are looking for more of?
Well, I think they are looking for more help from sellers. So I think this whole idea that many of us have spoken about and buyers have in buyer surveys, is what they're looking for is more business insights from sellers, excuse me. So it's really saying, okay, our salespeople really need to have more business acumen. And that, I think, is sort of increasingly being identified as a shortcoming in a lot of B2B sellers, is they just fundamentally don't understand how business works. And therefore, they may know a superficial feature benefit, something that's, use case that's been told to them by somebody else in the company, but they don't have the context of how business works to really make it meaningful to the buyer. So that part of the buyer experience really seems to be missing. And I think that's, if you're managing a B2B sales team, or if you're a B2B seller yourself, that's something you really need to focus on. And I wrote about this yesterday in my daily email that I sent out to my community, which was, sales managers never train sellers about the importance of putting together accurate forecasts and what the ramifications and impacts are in the company if they don't. If you're a small manufacturer and you're counting on sales to give you an accurate forecast, and they underperform, well, suddenly you've got all this, you may have finished products sitting in inventory that's consumed cash that suddenly you can't spend on marketing. Well, can't generate leads. Well, that's a huge impact. So I'm going to follow up in a couple of weeks with a second email about how to train your team to do more accurate forecasts. But it's that type of business acumen that again, buyers really want to see from sellers. Do you understand a business?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, and one that I've talked to people about a lot. Is you're absolutely 100% correct, because you need nowadays, I think, as a seller, to be curious about the business of business, right? So you need to learn about business acumen. You need to learn about the business of your buyer. And let's face it, in all honesty, Andy, once upon a time, salespeople kind of almost celebrated the fact that they knew nothing about anything below the top line, right? They were like, oh,
well, not what I was selling, but I know there were some cases.
I know, but I'm just saying that there were people who were like, here's and they didn't even know the economics of their own deals, right? Until they were broken down. So actually, their deal is losing the company money.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I don't think things have changed that much in that regard. I think that successful sellers in the B2B world have always been people who had business acumen, were able to provide insights to the buyers. But I think maybe there's more sensitivity to it just because we're able to talk more about it than we were before. We've got social media, we've got more books, more experts, all these things out there that we're sort of maybe sensitizing people to a way that there wasn't before. So I think it's become more critical. Yeah, I sort of had pushback on social media with somebody that made that comment earlier this week. It's like, yeah, in the past, people would show up and throw up, and today they have to have insights. And I'm like, look, I was selling complex communication systems worth millions of dollars. Believe me, we were giving insights to people. If you want to succeed, you always had to. So I don't think things change. I think we're just greater awareness of it because of the environment we operate in.
And I think it's interesting you bring up social media. So what do you think the role of social media is in sales going forward? Because again, we had that big pendulum swing where everybody went, it's all about social selling. It's all about social selling. It's all about just providing value and, emailing ebooks to people and, sending, forwarding comments or whatever. So what do you think the real role of social media is for sales going forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, the pendulum is still swinging badly in one direction, unfortunately, right now. And hopefully it'll start coming back because I don't know about you, but I'm inundated literally daily with people that want to connect just to pitch me.
Yeah.
And as opposed to connect to learn and then decide if there's an opportunity to sell me something, I never get a good process. Maybe once. I think I got one yesterday, actually, from a gentleman who runs a company in India. Did a great opening email for the first time, I think, in months. I was curious about what he had, and we connected, and it may be something, right? So I think the role is it's just part of the mix. I think a lot of us have sort of settled on that as being, but it's becoming an inextricable part of the mix, right? Is if you're not using it to understand and research your prospects and your potential buyers. And I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn every day, just looking people up and understanding who people are and what they might be interested in. If you're not doing that, then you're a fool, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think you can ignore it.
But if you think you can only do that.
Yeah, if you think you can only do that, I think that's problematic for you. And I think we've seen this sort of, as you said, pendulum swings on lots of things. Is that everybody fell in love with inbound marketing. Well, inbound marketing is still important. I mean, as I tell people, in an ideal world, I'd love to be in a situation where you only, if I was selling B2B, complex products like I did a while ago, I'd love it if I never had to prospect, right? If I had so many good, high quality leads that came in, all I had to do was pick up the phone and sell. Yeah, but the world doesn't operate that way. So you need to have inbound, you need to have outbound, you need to use social. I mean, you need to have the right mix to make it happen. Yeah,
and I guess one of the most important underlying messages is, I hate to break the news to you, there's no shortcuts. Never has been, never will be.
No, and that's why I sort of, and I think we've seen a relaxing some of this, but I mean, I sort of rebel against this whole idea of hacks, right? We can hack this, we can hack that. Sure, we might find some ways to make things more efficient and so on, but you still got to put in the work.
Yeah, exactly. So Martha said there's somebody who commented on Twitter, asked a question about the role of mobile in the salesperson's world, right? How important is mobile going to become? I mean, personally, I know at Pipeliner CRM, we have a very robust mobile app, and we have another big release next week because we really believe in putting all the information in the hands of the salesperson at the point of impact. So what's your thoughts on the impact of mobile on the salesperson?
Yeah, just as you said, I think that any trend that you look at, I mean, if you send out an email like we do on a daily basis to our community, the stats are that 70 to 80% of the people are opening them on their phone. So you have to presume that's the case pretty much throughout the day, increasingly. I mean, I look at my own behavior. The things that I interact with, not necessarily composing emails, are on my computer, but LinkedIn, Slack, things that I use on a daily basis a lot, mostly on my phone.
Yeah.
So I just think it's just part of the mix, and if you're not trying to optimize what you're doing for mobile, then again, it's problematic for you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's become, let's face it. I mean, the busy salesperson running around, yeah, they're checking stuff on their phone constantly. So if you're not optimizing the experience they're getting or making it work for them, then you're missing out on something. So what do you think about? We've talked a little bit about efficiency and
Mm.
productivity in 2019. What do you think are some ways other ways that people can improve their efficiency or productivity when it comes to selling?
Well, I mean, I think you have to start above the individual, right? Because I think a lot of the impetus for this has to come from management and the culture that they create. Because right now, in certain sectors like SaaS that you're in, there's large segments that are extremely process driven, extremely activity metric driven, and they've created this sort of comfortable environment where they know that a certain amount of activity yields a certain amount of orders, and but they don't really dig the next step down to say, well, what if I could do half that amount of activity and get twice as many orders for that? And I think, to me, this is the next big step that sellers need to take. And it's not a new thought, but it sort of got lost because I talk about stuff that I was doing 2 decades ago with this. But I think that it sort of got lost with the sort of rush of embrace and adoption of the technology is okay, yeah, we know we can do a certain amount of activities and generate a certain amount of orders. All right, here's the challenge. Let's do half as much of that activity and let's close twice as many deals. So how do we fundamentally change the equation? And it gets down to doing a much better job of qualification and as well discovery and qualification in ways that aren't happening because you see so many companies have this imperative, well, we need 5x pipeline coverage.
Yeah.
Well, if we got 5x pipeline coverage, what you're saying is de facto, we have to have bad sales behavior because we don't have the time to really efficiently qualify all these people in the way that we should. And so that just fundamentally needs to change. And you see some companies starting to tiptoe that direction that, sort of gone too far one way are starting to come back again. And, sort of a theme you and I are talking about is sort of this pendulum swing as we're seeing some people come back and say, okay, it's really a mix, right? We thought it was all one thing. Now it needs to be a better mix. And, I point to qualification as the primary culprit for low close rates for most companies, because you're spending time selling to companies that aren't ever going to buy from you. So, but you're doing that because you have to be able to show the management that you have 5x pipeline coverage.
Yeah.
So you have to break the cycle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is another soapbox thing of me. And actually, I did implement it at a company a number of years back where we decided to actually, here's a shocker, we decided to eat our own dog food. And actually, we were telling people that qualification was critical. So we went to our own pipeline. We became very rigorous in early stage focus and qualification. So what happened? Our pipeline shrunk, right?
As it
but
should.
in a good, as it should. Right.
Right.
But then I had to explain to the parent company when they say, wow, your pipeline is so much smaller than it was, and they were worrying about the future. And I was going, yes, but we're closing more business and we're more profitable right now. And they're saying, yes, that's great. But what happens in the future? Yeah. And then to your point, it was like, you don't have 5x or 6x in your pipeline anymore. I say, no, but I have the pipeline that we have a greater than average probability of closure.
Yeah, and so one of my challenges I'm going to make at some point this year, as part of the newsletter I send out on a daily basis to my community is that, okay, great, you're in SaaS business or you have an inside sales team and you're operating, let's say, at a 5x metric. So here's the challenge: make it 2.5x this year and close just as much business and hit your target. And I guarantee you can do it. I know you can do it. And people just have to have the will and have the insight to look at, okay, well, what are the factors that really drive our ability to close the number that we need to hit? And it's not the total aggregate number of prospects. That's not the indicator.
And why do you need, and the other question is, why do you need 5x? Well, you need 5x because you have a huge amount of dropout in your pipeline. Why do you have a huge amount of dropout? Because a lot of those were not opportunities, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's this vicious cycle that you get into. I mean, so I had one company at the beginning of 2018 that said, well, we wanted to double sales. So they wanted 2x pipeline. They were going from 5x to 9x. So basically doubling the pipeline. Like,
Right.
You realize that's absolutely insane, don't you? and I get sort of like blank stare. And it's like, yeah, even if you stay at 5x, the mission should be is how do I close twice as many deals? How do I get my close rate from 20% to 21 to 22 to 25 to 30%? Because that's way more profitable for me.
And that gets back to our original point: is with data, you can get data can mislead you, right? Because it just seems like that's a simple math equation, right? You say if I do some analysis, I close 1 for every 5, therefore I need 5, to close 1 or whatever. Instead of looking at going down below the surface and saying, why am I only closing 1 out of 5? Because 3 of those 5 shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, but they were mandated to be there, and so that's what I said. It really has to start with management. I think if you left sellers to their own devices, and they're sufficiently qualified, capable sellers, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd find a way, because they'd say, "Look, this is nuts. I can't work like this, right? I'm not being efficient." And my experience, again, is managing and growing sales teams for startups is, yeah, you have a process, but you give people, the chance to utilize their talents within that process the best they can. And it was like me. I mean, I've throughout my career selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment and services was, I maybe carried 1.5, 1.75 pipeline.
And so one of the other interesting things is, again, getting back to where we started the conversation, is the idea of bringing more of the human element back into selling. And so, and as you said correctly, the good salespeople have been doing this all along. What would you say for salespeople who maybe haven't emphasized, maybe have relied too much on technology, maybe are new into the into the arena? I mean, it seems like an odd question. Is how do you be more human?
Well, what they do is, join the Sales House. We'll teach them how to do that. So, I mean, without pitching unnecessarily, but one of the core courses that we offer in there is what we call a relationship boot camp, and it's built around this acronym that I use, the 4 core relationship skills, that if you master these, you can build a relationship with anyone, whether in business or in life, actually. And so the acronym is BALD, B-A-L-D, and the four skills are: be human, ask great questions, listen slowly, deliver value. And so if you look at that in the context, say, okay, well, if you can master these 4 skills, that's gold. You're golden right there. You can build rapport, you connect, you build trust, and you can close deals. So from the being human part of that, it really starts with, it ties a little bit to asking questions, but it starts with, being interested in the other person, being focused on them. We talk about empathy. Well, I mean, that's a good start on it as well, right? But it's not showing up in pitching. It's showing up in, asking a personal question, doing some small talk. These things that we see some sales trainers trying to train out of sellers, saying, oh, your customer doesn't have time for small talk. Well, we talk about using science in sales. Well, there's science, research reports that have been done that said, look, small talk is absolutely essential in building a good relationship. People want to connect at the human level first. Well, that's a simple thing. And one of the things I teach is, hey, what's the best first question to ask? It's as a way to build rapport and to open the conversation. And you don't have to spend a half hour in small talk, but just this one question, you learn a lot about a person.
And you're starting to communicate that you're looking beyond the person as a prospect and more as in, what's going on. So maybe it's small talk, maybe it's, really getting to the nub of what's going on in their work life or whatever, but like,
or in their personal life, even.
Or in their personal life, whatever. Just I couldn't agree more.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the prospects, they're under no illusions why you're there, why you're talking to them. So it's within that context that you build that relationship. I mean, they're not becoming your friend. You're building this functional relationship.
You touched on. I'm not going to jump up on my soapbox, but you touched on something that just drives me crazy, is this idea when people say, like, I don't want them to know I'm a salesperson. I don't want to come. I mean, I understand, yes, if you're over salesy, but people who go out of their way saying, I don't have sales on my business card. And I say, that's fantastic. That's really good. But I'm going to let you into a secret. they know you're a salesperson.
Right.
So embrace being a salesperson. You're there for a reason. Like, embrace it, and what you do as a salesperson is what matters. You're not fooling anyone.
No, you're not fooling anyone. And the thing is that we talked earlier about different buyers' perspective. This how you sell to someone is part of their overall buying experience, and it is a substantial element in their ultimate decision that they make. And because it is one of these emotional things that we talk about that help people make decisions, and even in really large organizations that supposedly have very complex and sort of rigorous decision trees or decision processes, at the end of the day, it boils down to emotion. There's been a lot of studies coming out here and several books written and published in the last several months about how people make decisions, where for all the process and rigor, at the end of the day, people are still guessing.
Yeah, there is for sure still a gut element involved, whether we like to admit it or not. And I would suggest everybody who's listening in examine the last number of purchases you made just personally or whatever, and really ask yourself what the decision process was, and you'll find out that there's an element of gut in there.
Oh yeah, well, the example I was reading recently was about people making a decision whether to get married or not, which is perhaps one of the most momentous decisions you can make in your life.
Yeah,
and everybody does it on gut.
Yeah. And well, the other thing is, I was amazed about if you take buying a house, right? I mean, again, one of the biggest purchases you make, what do people do? They walk into a house with a realtor, they look around, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, they go look, then they come back, look again, and then they go, yeah, I think this is the one, and they go off and buy it. Very few people spend months and months like deeply researching every aspect of the house and the neighborhood or whatever. They don't. So some of the biggest purchases you make, and as you say, marriage, and not being a purchase, but a decision.
Right.
Yeah, a decision. Biggest decisions you make, there is a huge element of you just feel like, yes, I think this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and so that's the emotional part of it. So this is your connection with your buyers. If you have multiple stakeholders and so on in a situation, that connection, emotional connection, really becomes decisive.
Yeah, and there's another part to that is if you can make that connection as a salesperson, there's nothing that destroys it more than if you're a chameleon and you change once the sale is made. So however you come across and project yourself during the sales process, better be who you really are.
Yeah, this speaks to how you build trust and this whole notion of integrity. And people tend to think of integrity as just being sort of honesty, but it's really not what the meaning is. The meaning is, in the case of building trust, is do your actions align with your words? Yeah, and exactly. that is a huge disconnect. And unfortunately, we see it too many times in sales because you go out, and this is an example I give all the time. People, when you talk about integrity, I said, okay, you show up the buyer, you tell them you're there to serve, you're there to help them, start going through the process, you get to the last week of the quarter, but if you buy this week, 20% off. And suddenly they say, well, you're not really here to serve me after all, are you? You just want the sale. And so we think about all these mindless things, or things we do mindlessly, let's say, as sellers, spiffs and all these other things that reward behaviors that really run counter this whole idea of being true to your, having your actions align with your words. Yeah,
and I think the other part is, once the sale goes through and then the customer calls you up because they have an issue, and you just say, "Here, I'm just going to forward you to service," right? And yes, that may be the correct thing to do, but if you do it like that, you've just said to the person, "I only cared about you when I was selling to you. I don't care about you anymore."
Well, that's why I think the same thing with the high pressure closing techniques at the end of a period is, it doesn't mean they're not going to buy from you, but their eyes have suddenly been opened and it's very clear to them exactly what the relationship is.
All right, well, we're at the end of our time here, but before we go on a sales chat, Andy, as you know, we always like to ask you to share a power tip with our audience. What is something that you do to set yourself up for success?
Oh, gosh. On what level? In sales or just in general?
In general. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's all about learning. I mean, it's about continuing to read and explore and try to understand sales, understand people, understand psychology, how people make decisions. Here I am, well into my 4th decade of selling. Not to date myself unnecessarily, but yeah, every day I'm still learning something. Yeah, we just talked this thing about decision making. It was just based on a book I was reading about that. Yeah, reading a book now about somebody advocating that, empathy is bad in most cases. I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. We'll read that. I mean, reading books on character. It's so I focus on the human aspect of selling, but you can never learn too much because you have to integrate all these little bits of knowledge, and they come to the fore when you get a chance to talk to a prospect, and it helps make you more interesting to them, which is really what you're looking for.
Yeah, so great tip. One I endorse fully is invest in yourself, right? Invest in your own intellect and your own developing your own job. Here's a thought for a salesperson. Maybe you're big into golf. Maybe instead of spending 3 hours this weekend practicing your golf swing, maybe read about sales. Because at the end of the day, the golf swing may not put bread on your table.
Right. Well, this is the whole premise behind starting the Sales House, is that this is a resource for sellers to come to. If you invest 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes a day, I guarantee you do that every day, for every work day for a year, just 10 minutes, you're going to be hitting your quota, and you'll be consistently hit your quota into the future as long as you keep on doing that. So I think the bar is pretty low, right? Instead of just 3 hours a week, it's just 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, this is great. Andy Paul, you can find him at andypaul.com.
AndyPaul.com, or come to the saleshouse.com. That's really our focus.
Okay, yeah. Saleshouse.com, easy to find.
TheSalesHouse.com.
TheSalesHouse.com. Okay, excellent. And Martha in Vienna, thank you for struggling through today, despite the fact that you probably just want to crawl into bed now with
hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate, or maybe hot whiskey, I don't know.
Hot whiskey, oh wow. Not sure.
All right, well, my name is John Golden, SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, Pipeline of CRM. Thank you all for joining this sales chat, and I'll see you all again for one really soon. Thank you.
Bye.